Now before we move on to the next square, I'm just going to show you how to weave your ends in, also how to fix any odd stitches that you might have knitted in a different colour, and also to trap in any long strands that you may have on the back of your knitting. So just 3 things that I'm going to show you, and the first one is weaving in the ends. I've done most of mine, as you can see, and I've just left a couple of ends here. And what I normally do is, rather than use a blunt tipped needle, I use one that's a little bit more pointy, and then I take my yarn and thread it onto the needle, and then I'm going to weave this end into the same colour of section of yarn. So I'm not going to go where the teal colour is, I'm going to keep where the pink colour is, and I'm going to thread on an angle like that. So I'm not going to thread in a straight line, I'm just going to go on an angle. Now you can, if you want to, if there's another strand of yarn nearby and you want to just tie them into a little knot, you can do that, but only if they're near to each other and it's not going to pull on your knitting. So I've knotted those first of all, and that just means that they're nice and secure, and you don't have to do that, it's entirely up to you. Now I'm kind of going to go through the strands of yarn that are sitting on the back, and I'm not going under the strands, I'm going just through them a little bit. I'm always going to go through the wool itself. Then I'm going to go through a few stitches on the back of the knitting. So can you see I've gone through those stitches, and then maybe back through the next couple of strands like that, and then maybe through one. How long you do this is entirely up to you. I've got quite a nice run there of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That might be about right. And then I'm going to pull that yarn through like that. Okay, and then I'm going to hop to the next stitch along, and I'm going to go all the way back just through the stitches, like through the actual stitches, not under them, because if you go through the stitches it just means you're not going to spoil the front of your knitting in any way. So you can always check just by turning your knitting over, and if you can see your wool needle through the stitches, then it's going to show on the front, so you'll have to take it out before you pull it through and do it again. So through the back of the stitches, it also holds the yarn much better than just sliding it underneath the stitches, because it's actually going through, it's a bit tighter. So just pull it back through, don't pull too tightly, let it just sit nice, and then you can just snip it off like that. It's not really that visible, is it? I mean, I've done it all the way along, so you can't really see. And then I'm going to do it again with the teal just to show you once more. I'm going to now go in the other direction and just kind of get through those strands of yarn and through the stitches. You can just alternate between the two like that. Check on the other side that I can't see my wool needle, pull the yarn through, hop across, and then just sort of come back along like that. Check. Oh, that was just me pushing it there, but check no silver from your needle, and then give it a little tug and then just snip it off like that. And that's how I weave my ends in. And the next tip is how to alter one of the stitches if you've done it wrong. So if you've knitted something in the wrong colour by accident, don't panic, because you can do this and it's not that noticeable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fix one of these blue stitches, teal stitches here. So I'm going to fix one of these teal stitches with duplicate stitch. We're going to pretend I've done it in the wrong colour. So what you do is you get a small piece of yarn in the right colour that you should have used, pop it onto your blunt-ended wool needle, come up through the base of the stitch. So I'm going to alter this stitch here. So look where the V of the stitch is and come up where the V goes into the stitch below. And just make sure you leave some yarn at the back. Then you're going to go underneath the 2 strands of the stitch above. So where that comes into a V, just pop your wool needle completely under those 2 strands as if you're doing like a running stitch. And just pull it through. And then take the needle back into the original place that you came out of, and then just give it a little tug. And can you see it's covered it up? So if that needed to be in the grey, even though the teal is quite dark, it's covered it up. From a distance you're just not going to see that. So that's a really good tip. And then all you need to do on the back then is just, you know, tie off the yarns and then weave them in just like I showed you before. So I hope that helps if anybody has accidentally knitted the wrong stitch. The final tip that I'm going to just show you before we start on the next square is what to do if you've got like a long strand of yarn on the back that's maybe a little bit loose and you're worried about it snagging on something. So what I do in that case is I'll just take some regular cotton of a similar colour. So I'm going to do it on a pink stitch. If you haven't got cotton in the same colour, you could cut a length of yarn and try to unravel a little strand out of it and use that instead. But all I'm going to do is I'm going to do it with this stitch here. Let's pull it so it's a bit long and loose. I'm just going to go underneath the strand and find a stitch to attach it to. Again, I'm not going right under the stitch, I'm going through it with my sewing needle and then just come out the other end. And then you can just tie that in a little knot like that. Okay, and then you can just either snip the yarn or you can weave it in if you really want to. I'd say that if you were using the yarn itself, you might just want to weave in those ends, but can you see it's barely visible, but it's caught the yarn onto a stitch below, and so it's not all loose and baggy anymore. So that's just a quick fix really, for odd strands of yarn that might be a little bit loose. And so really now you're all ready to start the next square.